grew up in Baker, one of 7 boys. My parents were very devout Southern Baptists. My dad was a deacon. So church in those my early years was, for me, was more of an expectation, not on my heart. Even going on to the point of being in the youth group, the youth choir, it was all an expectation. And it was really until at the age of 17, me and my father had a parting of the ways, let's say, because I didn't go to Sunday school one morning. I couldn't explain to him that at the time I had a full-time job after school at McDonald's. I was a manager and I closed on a Saturday night. My way or the highway come into it. Well, I took the highway. A few years later, I met this beautiful 23-year-old English teacher from Zachary. And we got married and had a baby. And she's 5 years old, or was 5 years older than me. But she was probably 3 years into our marriage. She visited here because we were actually married in Bogalusa by a Methodist minister. She started coming here. Well, at the time, I chose to go to a plant job. Back in the early 70s, 80s, when I started there, you rarely got a Sunday off. So I really didn't come a lot. And when I did come, from Bill Moon and Reverend Marie and other ones, but my wife absolutely loved it here. She was part of the education, being a retired teacher and everything. My oldest daughter was married here. And actually, when she got married, she set the podium carpet on fire. So I had to recarpet the stuff. So I got involved here, but I married this beautiful woman, and we were the definition of yin and yang. And it was one of those relationships where a lot of times the guys at work would say, well, we're going to go do this. And I'd say, man, you need to come. I said, no, I'm going to go with her. If we can't do it together, a lot of times I don't do it. Well, we had 2 beautiful girls, and my youngest daughter at the time was having some health issues, and my wife, one of the reasons she retired from teaching and went into nursing, she felt she wasn't getting the care here. So she took my youngest daughter to the Mayo Clinic and got her diagnosed and got her corrected, got it so we knew what was going on with her and health. One day, after they come home from the Mayo and everything was looking good, I come in from work one afternoon, and my wife was sitting in the chair, and I could see she'd been crying. And I at first thought, well, Jenny's going to be okay. This is where we at here. And she said, no, it's not that, Gary. She said, I'm just hurting, and my back is killing me. And come to find out that she had been to gastro, she had been to other doctors that my daughters knew, but neither one of them told me. So I told her that afternoon, this is 8:30 at night, well, if we can't do nothing else, we can go to the emergency room and I can get you relief. So we go to the emergency room at Layla Lake. A little while later, we put her in a room, and they gave her a sedative to help her with the pain and rest a little bit. And the 2 doctors come in and told me the diagnosis was stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And here it is at 11 o'clock at night. My wife is asleep, thank God. And I'm just sitting here with this. And it preyed on me. And I went down. I had to get out of the room for a little bit. I went down to the chapel, which, I found. And I just went in there, and this is 11:30 at night. And I'm by myself, and I'm just looking at it, and I'm going, why? I'm screaming, why? Tell me why. What's the message here? Why are you taking this woman? Take me. Take me. Crisis of faith, right? Is that what you would call it? Crisis of faith. Not just of, in. From that day of diagnosis, 40 days later, she passed. And it destroyed me. It broke me. Several months later, I come to church, and we used to sit up on the right next to the stained glass of a snake in a tree. And I come that day, and I don't even hear the message, but I mean, I broke down in church, and I had to get up and leave. So I struggled with it a long time. A year later, or a little over a year, you hit these trigger days, they call it, where I'd worked 64 dogs in a row. My choice, But I was in such pain, it was mental. You're thinking it's physical, but it was mental. I left that morning. I called my doctor, physician's assistant, Miss Tracy. So I called her, meet me at the office, Gary. And she did a little check and nothing. She said, Gary, I don't know, but you're, and I made the statement to her, if you don't take care of something, I'm going to take care of it when I get home. And I think back on that ride from Zachary to Central where I live and where her office is. It was as simple as, do I take a left and go to Tracy, or do I take a right and go home and end it? I don't know if God spoke to me. I don't know how that works. I feel like I'm a 10-year-old in Christianity. I'm learning these things, and I'm 67 years old. If he did, thank God he did, because I would have destroyed my daughters then. But I got voluntarily committed. Went through that, went through a year of counseling, 3 days a week, mandated by the court. And then after I finished counseling, the judge or whatever with the thing asked, what do you think? And I said, didn't bring her back. And then still today, as I've witnessed with you and Miss Amy, and I appreciate so much y'all sitting there and listening to the story, is that I'm still 15 years later in that crisis of faith. I don't know why. My story, one day I hope has a happy ending, but right now, a crisis of faith. And I'm trying to get to that point to where, I jokingly said something to y'all the other day about, well, Gary, you're up here and you do maintenance and you do this. And I said, to me, it feels like penance. Is that okay? I don't understand it, And I'm reading of the Bible. I got a book to where it's going through the chapters, but I'm looking like at Joshua and Jacob and my God, some of these lived 900 years. How? Job. I read a book about Job. That's just, I'm trying. There's good in this world. I wish, looking back, I would have told myself my priorities were not. I have a grandson who is now worship leader at a new church, Christ the King. And when he sat there and told me one day he was going to go into the ministry, and that shocked me to begin with. But he loves it. He's a great musician. But like I told him one day, I said, Grant, you got your priorities wrong. You put the church over your family. And I said, not God. You put the church. Put God, then your family, and then the church. And I wish I would have done that. I would love to, like I said, I have memories of sitting in that church with her, with my arm around her. But the memories I have is me looking out that stained glass, not listening to the message. It's hard. It's it used to be hard to even come back in that church. So as I'm saying, I had my priorities wrong. And I'm trying to put it now to where, my 4 grandchildren, all involved in church, 2 are ministers, and whatever. I got a brother in the ministry, and how they come out of our childhood of, like I said, church growing up to me was an expectation. It was not a love, not a wanting. I'm a 10-year-old again, and I'm learning, and I want to learn. We've got some great people here. I can say that. I cherish this men's group. And so they've helped tremendous, but it's the same as this. You called me last week, asked me to do this, thinking hard about it, Like I told you and Reverend Amy that I sat there and listened to Charlie Kirk's wife when she did that and nothing political or whatever, but what I heard from this woman 3 days after her husband had been killed, God is so good. God is so good. And I'm going, how can you feel that way? I wish I could get to that point. And that's where I hope my story goes. It had to be God's hand that day I decided to seek help instead of doing something that would have destroyed the rest of my family, you know. But when you tell a young Christian, and no matter the age, young Christian, it was God's voice. I didn't hear a voice, but he must have been leading my hand. My moral would be, if God would have took me that day instead of her, I don't think I'd be in heaven.